Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining this session. I'm going to see if I can get my slides up. That'd be great if I can. I can't see them at the moment. Excellent. There we go. Perfect. So I'm going to talk to you about international lessons on how schools can best equip students for their working lives. And over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Youth Employment Challenge across the OECD. And I'm going to share with you some details of a new research project which we've been undertaking over the last 2 years, which we think has significantly increased our understanding about what works in career guidance. So I'm going to talk to you about the methodology because it's a bit unusual. And also I'm going to talk to you about, show you some of the results. And I am going to talk about some of the implications for schools. Now, I'm sure you're all very much aware about the anxiety which is in place about the risk of youth unemployment. During any sort of like economic recession or period of economic turbulence, we find that young people are particularly vulnerable to rising youth unemployment. And just 10 years ago, during the great financial crisis, we saw across the OECD countries peaks in youth unemployment. And the thing is that they stayed really high for a long time. So you see Estonia there, youth unemployment in 2007 was about 10%. And then, so like 5 years later, it was still twice that level. And the thing is that, young people are always, at a disadvantage in the search for work. This is the ratio of youth to adult unemployment. And what you see here is how many more times somebody who is under 25 is likely to be unemployed compared to somebody over 25. This is from 2020. Well, that's the pandemic. But I could show you the same figures for previous years, and it'd be very similar. And you'll see here in Estonia that young people are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than older workers. And that's because, well, they have less experience, they have poorer networks, they have less know-how about how to get the jobs. And the question really for us is what schools can do. Can schools reduce the risk of youth unemployment? Can they help young people really have better transitions? And there's been a lot of focus on this during the pandemic. That leaflet you saw there we did with the European Commission and UNESCO and CEDEFOP and the ILO, really sort of like making a case. But even doing that, we've all been people working in guidance, we've all been frustrated by lack of understanding about longitudinal evidence. We really want to know sort of like, we really want to see it to be able to see that there's this strong relationship with something that happens to a teenager and then what happens 10 years later. So this is what we've done over the last 2 years. We've been looking at national longitudinal data sets. And so these are data sets which follow a cohort of young people, maybe 10,000 young people, from childhood through their teenage years into adulthood. And there's a few of these exist in the world, not lots, but there is enough of them for us to do some systematic work. Now we've published 3 working papers, and you'll see, they're all on our website. Firstly, we reviewed existing literature, and there is some, but it's limited in particular areas in particular countries. Then we analysed new data from Australia, Denmark, and Switzerland. And then finally, we used data from Australia, UK, and the US again, but also from Canada, from China, Germany, Korea, and Uruguay. And, using this methodology, what we were looking for is, you see here, these are the data sets which we're looking at. So we've, and you'll see here the years, when data was collected, the age which they were collected, the age which they were followed up. And so we didn't do a new survey. We used these existing surveys, and many of these have never been analysed to look for the relationships which we're interested in. And so, we looked for potential indicators or predictors of better career readiness, better outcomes. We looked at NEET status, which is basically youth unemployment, whether somebody is not in education, employment, or training. We looked at salary, is it higher or lower than you'd expect? We looked at career satisfaction, and an important range of controls, because you need to make sure that participation in the career guidance activity is not a mask for something else. It's not that just like boys do this or, wealthier children do this. So lots of statistical controls, particularly around academic achievement. Now, doing this, there is always there are always limitations. The data's old. We don't have all the right questions and we would like in all the different data sets. We only focus on things which are most comparable. So the results I'm going to show you in just a moment are probably an underestimate of the impact of guidance. But this in itself is an unprecedented study. It's never been done before to look, systematically across different countries and these data sets, these longitudinal data sets, to see what we could find. And here are the results. Here's the overview. This is what we find. We group our indicators into 3 areas about exploring the future, experiencing the future or potential future, and thinking about the future. And you see here that we have some confirmed ones. We have 11 in all. And we say they're confirmed because we find evidence of them in 3 different countries or more. So we look at career conversations, engaging with people in work through career fairs, job workplace visits, and so on. And you'll find here at the bottom, these are ones we haven't quite got enough evidence for. It's only 1 or 2 countries, but we think something probably quite meaningful is happening, but we can't quite show it yet. So I'm going to drill into these, and so I'll look at them so one by one. Here in exploring the future, let me just run you through how this table works. Here are our confirmed indicators. We have 5 here. And these were particularly important because when we looked at the data, the existing literature, very little has been done on this. And you see here the countries in bold. That's our new work, which we're very proud of, the new work. So we have these new indicators here in 3 or more countries where young people take part in career conversations. So the question is normally, have you spoken to anybody about a job you're interested in after you leave education? If you say yes, we find benefits later on. And, that could be with a teacher, it could be with a parent, it could be with a friend. We find these benefits, engaging with people in work, through career talks or job fairs, workplace visits or job shadowing. And this was really interesting. We hadn't really expected this. But a number of surveys asked young people, have you had been supported, taught to complete a resume or a CV? Have you done interview skills training? And we find there that, we find this consistent relationship with better outcomes. And finally, occupationally short programs. So these are in general education. You find them a lot in Australia, Canada, and the US, where maybe for a day or week, somebody might do a course focused on engineering or healthcare. And we find here some good relationship. And what we've done, we've taken our studies, our new work, and these are, we're using analysis of these different data sets, the longitudinal data sets. And where there's anything existing already, which is robust, we've added that in. So we're kind of getting a pool of evidence here. And you'll find over here the impact sizes. They can vary. Young people, here we focus particularly around NEET, less likely to be unemployed by different ratios or different percentage points. And so we kind of find that, these are, there's something really important happening in terms of exploring. Let me turn next, though, to experiencing the future or, potential futures in work. A lot of data around part-time working, a lot of existing data, many studies, particularly in the UK and the US, but many existing studies. And we were able to add to that literature. And we find that young people who work part-time, alongside their full-time studies, go on to do better later on, typically. And in the example you have here, we're looking at individuals who work part-time at 14 or 15 in the United States and 6% more, 12, 13 years later. And volunteering, so volunteering is very interesting. 5 years ago, there was very few longitudinal studies, practically nothing in terms of the impacts of volunteering. And now, our work combined with recent literature, finds it really compelling that, volunteering. And the question we often get asked is that, is it just a self-selection thing? Is it only the kids who are really interested who actually benefit? And there's one very good US study where even the children who had to volunteer, had no choice, they also get the premium. One interesting thing to look at is that we don't yet have sufficient evidence around work placements, and we'd love to see more work there. We'd love to see more work around work placements and understand how they can be most effective. And our instinct is that if delivered well, that they probably will have a positive effect on young people. These are school-mediated work placements. And then thirdly, we're looking at how young people think about the future. And again, lots of new work here. Let me just run through these indicators and what they mean. Career certainty. By that, what we mean is the ability of a young person to name a job which they expect to have 10 or 15 years later. Now, it doesn't need to be fixed, but what it tells us is that they're actively imagining, visualizing a future for themselves in work. And that's a good thing. Certainty is better than sort of like uncertainty in 15 out of 20 studies from 9 countries, which we've looked at. Having higher levels of ambition, even if you control for the qualifications that young people have, is a better thing. So here we define this in terms of interest in professional managerial roles, but career ambition is a good thing. Career alignment, that's when you look at the educational plan of a young person. Do they plan to go to university? Do they plan to stay on for upper secondary and so on? And then you look at the occupational expectation. What job do they think they're going to have? And if their qualifications, if the education which they plan is more or less balanced with the access to allow access to the sort of jobs they're interested in, we call them aligned. But if they underestimate the education which they require, which happens an awful lot, then they're at a disadvantage. Then finally, we have instrumental motivation towards school. And by this, we mean a young person's ability to see the connection between what they're doing in the classroom with who they might become later on in the workplace. And so we test it through statements like, working hard at school will help me get a good job, or school is a waste of time. And here we find very strong evidence that that agreeing, it showing this extrinsic value is useful to you. Of all the countries we looked at, probably the most consistent evidence comes from Canada. And you'll see there the way that we have outcomes, positive outcomes linked to both earnings and to unemployment or better employment prospects. So the Canadian survey is particularly good. But we find lots of evidence there that the guidance is working. So let me now just show you a couple of slides using PISA 2018 data, and here you'll find in our publications lots of data across these different indicators where we show where countries are. Here's volunteering. Estonia here is in the middle. About 50% of students volunteer. So that's a good thing. But from our point of view, we think that's part-time working and volunteering, something that all students should do. But going back to that question about misalignment, underestimating the education you need to achieve your job goals. Here's something which we find consistently. Young people who performed, at a low level on the PISA assessments in mathematics, particularly, we find, consistently are more likely to have a very high occupational plan. They want to be a professional, they want to be a manager, but they're not planning on going to tertiary education. Now, in some countries, they might well be able to do that, achieve that. But in most countries now, increasingly tertiary education is a passport for those sorts of jobs. And in Estonia, nearly 44% of the lower performers are underestimating what they need. And this is a concern for us. It suggests that there's confusion about the labour market, what they need to achieve. And then thirdly here, looking at career conversations, you'd imagine all young people have a career conversation. When PISA, we asked young people in certain countries, had they spoken to someone about a job they would like to do when they finish education? 82% of Estonians at 15 said yes, but 18% said no. And we really want to be able to encourage a culture of career conversations, because that's where the investigation happens, and it's an indicator of an investigative mindset which we want to achieve. And then just looking here, we haven't got the data here for Estonia, but what we did was we combined participation in three core career guidance activities. Has the young person spoken to a career advisor? Have they been on a workplace visit? Have they been to a job fair? Those two we know are associated with better outcomes. And across the OECD, less than 20% of 15-year-olds can say they've done those three things. And that's a matter of concern for us. Particularly, we're seeing a relationship here with levels of youth unemployment. So this table here, which is quite complicated, but let me talk you through it. Across the bottom here, you've got participation in these three guidance activities. So have they done these three things? So these are the countries over here on the right, which have done the most of it. And up here, we've got the ratio of youth to adult unemployment. And it's tricky to sometimes really draw this kind of close analysis, but through the scatter chart, we can see these patterns that the countries where students don't participate much in guidance activities experience much higher levels of youth unemployment compared to older people. And the opposite applies as well. So this is what we think is happening. Globally, young people are staying in education longer than ever. They have more decisions to make than ever before. But those decisions are becoming more difficult because the labour market is becoming more turbulent, more dynamic, but also education and training courses are often becoming more complicated, more marketized. societies expect young people to show personal agency through their transitions, to make choices which are right for them. But to do so, they need access to guidance resources. And the Career Readiness Indicators highlights some of these resources, that's these tools, which we can see making a difference. And effective guidance, we would argue, creates a virtuous circle of students exploring, experiencing, thinking about their futures, clarifying, confirming, enabling their transitions. And just to show you a bit about some of the relationships here. In PISA, we have for many countries details of participation in standard career guidance activities. So have young people have done these things, complete a questionnaire, been to a job fair. What we did is with statistical controls in place for levels of achievement, social background, gender, we said, just taking part in these activities, can we see an association with, higher levels of career certainty, higher levels of career ambition, lower levels of career alignment, greater instrumental motivation. And we see a very strong pattern across. And if I drill down, you're looking here, we see it's like the extent of the relationship. So these are the percentage of students who are misaligned, and we see here, somebody who's spoken to someone about a job they'd like to do, much less likely to be misaligned than somebody who's never spoken to anybody. And then this is no idea, uncertainty. Young people who have career conversations are much more likely to be, more certain about or having a clear idea about where their future ambitions lie. So what we find here is that through this work, we've got significant, substantial new evidence underpinning 11 confirmed indicators from multiple countries, 10 countries in all, that shows that guidance has a central role to play in enabling better employment outcomes for youth. But PISA 2018 tells us that too few students are career ready. And because teenage attitudes about work are so important to outcomes and need time to develop, guidance obviously should begin well before the age of 15, primary school, we would say, and continue obviously after the age of 15. Young students from a young age should explore the world of work, but particularly with the involvement of employers, and people in work, that rich episodes of employer engagement. That's what we find, particularly important. And then we see students gaining first-hand experience of the working world, volunteering and part-time work, and that might not happen within the school or through the school, but the school should be aware of it and be looking to help young people understand what they're gaining through those experiences. And effective systems will encourage, enable, and require students to think critically and continually about the futures in work. Now, more research is required. We only have a limited amount of data at the moment. We'd love there to be more. But from this, we've developed 14 questions, which we think schools should ask themselves. And you'll see here, and I think you'll get a copy of the slides, so rather than go through every one, but these relate back to those indicators. So is there a pattern of career fairs, career talks, workplace visits? Does your school teach students how to apply for a job? And if you go through our working papers and our policy briefs, you'll find the advice and guidance which we have based upon our new analysis, but also the academic literature in here, the international literature, and we've worked very carefully with a range of analysts to really try and capture the best possible guidance about career conversations, this process about getting a job, employer engagement. I have a series of short publications which are available. So I am coming to an end now. Let me firstly tell you how you can keep in touch. You can come to our project website. We have a free monthly newsletter. I put everything on Twitter, so follow me on Twitter if that's your thing, or you can contact me directly. And what we're going to be doing next is, we're building upon this work. We're building upon this work to dig into the practice which aligns with the empirical results, to really understand, what in detail the practice which we can be completely confident to say that this really will make a difference. And within this, what we're doing is we're looking at particularly use of digital technologies in guidance, and we're looking at the way that guidance can challenge inequalities and support access towards green jobs, which the ILO tells us there's going to be more than 25 million of across the OECD over the years ahead. So at that point, let me finish. I'm very happy if we have time to deal with any sort of comments or questions. People should feel free to email me if they'd like to follow up on any individual points.
Thanks, Dr. Mann. We indeed have some questions. One of them is actually formulated by Erika herself. Xavier.
It was about a calling. What about a calling? Is it most important to help and to support them to find their own path and how to do it? And maybe to help them that their career and the real calling is not separated.
Well, what we certainly think that young people should be supported in finding their calling. We think that's really important. We think that that investigative process of trying to understand or trying to visualize and plan a future should begin quite young. And in that, we don't expect children in primary school to have a career plan and know exactly who they want to be, because it's a process of exploration, and we'd like that process of exploration to begin early. And that's allowing young people to see a connection between the education which they're taking part in and a possible imagined future later on. And it's important to do so from a young age, because the most important decisions which young people make about their careers aren't at 15 or 16 or 18 at the end of lower or upper secondary. It's all the way through education where they're deciding, just how hard they're going to study, different subjects. And when they get to lower secondary, they're going to have choices to make, and upper secondary, still greater choices. And what we found is that young people who participate in typical guidance activities are much more likely to have a clearer and more informed view about their imagined future, where they want to go and how they might get there.
Another question: if you could carry out one change in the career field to better help young people, what would it be? Just one change.
Oh, that's such a good question.
Simple one.
Well, it sounds very simple, but I've never been asked that before. I think the one thing I would say is that a rich experience of employer engagement should be fundamental and integrated into guidance. So we have guidance systems which are based around a lot of advice and support, and that foundation is incredibly important. It's really important that young people have access to trained counsellors, because we know that many young people have a lot going on in their lives, and trained counsellors are well placed to be able to help them, see through the short-term obstacles to focus on the longer term. But the thing I think from my work was really just make a difference is these first-hand encounters with the labour market, with people in work. And I think through them, young people are able to get an authentic insight into the future. And that learning opportunity is so powerful.
I see. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Mann, Senior Analyst from OECD. We are wrapping up your presentation here.